Dotty Dimple at Play, Chapter 4, A Spoiled Dinner. Next morning, Dotty Dimple and her father started for Maine. Flyaway did not like this at all. Her cousin had been so pleasant and so entertaining that she wished to keep her always. "What for you can't stay, Dotty Dimple?" "Oh," said Dotty, tearing herself away from the little clinging arms, "I must go home and get ready for Christmas." "No, you mustn't," replied Katy. "I've got a Santa Claus in our chimney. You mustn't go home." "It isn't for Santa Claus at all, darling. It's for my papa and mamma's wedding, to stand up so they can be married over again. Now kiss me and let me go." "Her's going home to Christmas pie," remarked Katy, as she took her mournful way with her mamma to the house where they were visiting. She did not know what a wedding might be, but was sure it had pies in it. "There goes a right smart little girl," said Horace, with a sweep of his thumb towards the Cleveland cars. "If it wasn't for Prudy, I should like her better than any other cousin I have in the world." "She is an engaging child," replied his mother, "and really seems to be outgrowing her naughty ways." Thus, you see, Dotty Dimple, in coming away from Indiana, had left in the minds of her friends only golden opinions. Perhaps she was rather overrated. Everything had gone well with her during her visit. Why should she not be pleasant and happy? I am inclined to think there was the same old naughtiness in her heart, only just now it was asleep. We shall see. Nothing remarkable occurred on the homeward journey, except that Mr. Parlin bought some goldfishes in Boston and carried them home as a present to Mrs. Reed. They traveled one night in a sleeping car, and by that means reached Portland a day earlier than they were expected. Dotty hardly knew whether to be glad or sorry for this. There was a great deal to be said on both sides of the question. She had anticipated the pleasure of being met at the depot by Susie and Prudy, and now that she was not to be thought of, but it would be delightful to give the family a surprise. On the whole, she was very well satisfied. As they drove up to the new home, however, what was their astonishment to find it closed. There was not even a window open, or any other sign that the house was inhabited. Dotty ran to every door and shook it. "Why, Papa, do you suppose there's anybody dead?" "The probability is, Alice, that they have gone away. I will run over to Miss Prosser's and see if she knows anything about it." Mrs. Prosser was the nearest neighbor on the left. Her little daughter came to the door in tears, having hurt herself against a trunk in the hall. "Miss Carey," said Mr. Parlin, "can you tell me where Mrs. Parlin and the rest of the family are gone?" "Yes, Caddy Prosser, the house is shut up," added Dotty. "I'm afraid they're dead." "I don't know where they've gone, nor anything," sobbed Carrie. "I didn't know the trunk was in the entry, and I came so fast I fell right over it." "I'm very sorry you're hurt," said Mr. Parlin. "Is your mother at home?" "No, sir, she isn't. Her trunk came, but she didn't." There was no information to be obtained at the Prossers, so Mr. Parlin went to Mr. Lawrence's, the nearest neighbor on the right, making the same inquiries. But all he learned was that a carriage had been seen standing at Mr. Parlin's door. Who had gone away in it, nobody could tell. Dotty paced the pavement with restless steps, her mind agitated by 1,000 wild fantasies. Grandma Reed never went anywhere. Perhaps she was locked up in the house, and Zip too. Nora was at Cape Elizabeth. She had walked out to see her friend Bridget, the girl with the red hair. And just as likely as not, she didn't even ever mean to come back again. Mother and Susie and Prudy had gone to Willowbrook to Grandpa Parlin's. Of course they had. And left Grandma Bede all alone in the house with nothing to eat. How strange! How unkind! "Grandma!" she called out under Mrs. Reed's window. There was no answer. Dotty fancied the white curtain moved just a little, but that was because a fly had balanced himself on its folds. Grandma was not there, or if she was, she must be very sound asleep. Oh dear, dear! And here were Dotty and Father come home a day earlier than they were expected, and instead of giving the family a joyful surprise, they had a surprise themselves, only not a joyful one by any means. How impolite it was in everybody, how unkind to go away. At first, Dotty had been alarmed, but now her indignation got the better of her fears. When she did see Prudy again, the sister who pretended to love her so much, she wouldn't take the presents out of her trunk for ever so long just to tease the naughty little girl. Meanwhile, her father did not appear to be at all disturbed. Perhaps they've gone to the islands or somewhere else not far away to spend the day. It is now nearly 2 o'clock. You may go to the Pribble house with me and take your dinner, and then I will unlock the house and find someone to stay with you till night. Would you like that? Or would you prefer to go at once to your Aunt Eastman's? You may have your choice." Dotty reflected about half a minute. "I will go to Aunt Eastman's, if you please, Papa." This appeared to her decidedly the most dignified course. She would go to Aunt Eastman's, and she would not be in the least haste about coming back again. She would teach her sisters, especially Prudy, that it is best to be hospitable towards one's friends when they have been away on a long journey. Her anger may seem very absurd, but you must remember, little friends, that Dotty Dimple had now become a travelled young lady. She had seen the world, and her self-esteem had grown every day she had been away. Her heart was all aglow with love towards the dear ones at home, and it was very chilling to find the door locked in her face. She did not stop to reflect that no unkindness had been intended. As they drove to Aunt Eastman's, her father observed that her bright little face was very downcast, but supposed that her sadness arose from the disappointment. There were depths of foolishness in children's hearts which even her parents cannot fathom. Strange to say, neither Mr. Parlin nor Dotty had thought that the family might be visiting at Mr. Eastman's, but such was the case. It was Johnny's birthday, and his father had sent the carriage into the city that morning for Mrs. Parlin, Grandma Reed, and the children. As for Nora, Dotty was right with regard to her. She had walked out to the Cape to see the auburn-haired Bridget. "I'm glad Johnny was born today instead of tomorrow," said Prudy, "for tomorrow we wouldn't go out of the house for anything, Auntie." "I can seem to see Cousin Dimple," said Percy. "She'll carry her head higher than ever." Prudy cast upon the youth as strong a look of disapproval as her gentle face could express. "Percy, you mustn't talk so about Dotty. She is my sister. She isn't so very proud, but if I was as handsome as she is, I should be proud too." "Oh, no, she is very meek. Dimple is. Just a little lamb. Don't you remember that verse she used to repeat? 'But chillens you should never let your naughty ankles rise.' Your little hands were never made to tear each other's eyes out. If she's cross, it's because you and Johnny tease her so, said Prudy. I think it's a shame. Percy only laughed. He and Prudy were sitting in the doorway, arranging bouquets for the dinner table. Susie joined them, bearing in her hands some dahlias and tuberoses. Why, Prudy, said she, what makes your face all aflame? She has been fighting for your little dove of a sister, replied Percy, the one that went west to finish her education. This speech only deepened the color in Prudy's face, though she tried hard to subdue her anger, and closed her lips with the firm resolve not to open them again till she could speak pleasantly. Look, exclaimed Percy, there's a carriage turning the corner. Why, it's Dimple herself with Uncle Edward. It can't be. It is. Both little girls ran to the gate. Oh, father! Oh, Dotty! Why, when did you get home? By this time, Mrs. Parlin had come out, also Mrs. Eastman and Johnny. Everybody was as surprised and delighted as possible, and even Miss Dimple, sitting in state in the coach, was perfectly satisfied and condescended to alight instead of riding through the carriage gateway. Oh, Dotty Dimple, I'm so glad to see you, cried Prudy. It is my sister Alice, and she is grown so dear, that I would be the jewel that trembles at her ear. Only you don't wear earrings, you know. Are you glad to see me, though, Prudy? Then what made you go off and shut the house up? Oh, we didn't expect you till tomorrow, and it's Johnny's birthday. Dinner is almost ready. Aren't you glad? Such a dinner, too. Any bill of fare? Asked Dotty, with a sudden recollection of past grandeur. A bill of fare? Oh, no, those are for hotels. But there's almost everything else. You can go upstairs with me and wash your face. Dotty appeared at a table with smooth hair and a fresh ruffle, which Prudy had basted in the neck of her dress. She looked very neat and prim, and as Percy had predicted, carried her head higher than ever. I suppose, said Aunt Eastman, you will have a great many wonderful things to tell us, Dotty, for I'm sure you traveled with your eyes open. Yes'm, I hardly ever went to sleep in the cars, but when you said eyes, Annie, it made me think of the blind children. We went to the asylum to see them. How do they look? Asked Johnny. They don't look at all. They're blind. Astonishing. I'd open my eyes if I were they. Why, Percy, they're blind. Stone blind. How is that? How blind is a stone? Dotty busied herself with her turkey. Her Eastman cousins all had a way of rendering her very uncomfortable. They made remarks which were intended to be witty, but were only pert. They were not really kind-hearted, or they would have been more thoughtful of the feelings of others. Alice, said dear Mrs. Reed, trying to turn the conversation, I see thee wears a very pretty ring. Dotty took it off her finger and passed it around for inspection. I never had a ring before, said she with animation. I never had anything to wear except clothes. Percy laughed. I found the pearl in an oyster stew, Grandma. It's such a very funny place out west. Yes, it is really a pearl, said Percy, only spoiled by boiling. Look her, Toddlekins, oysters don't grow out west. They grow here on the coast. You'd better study astronomy. Dotty took refuge in silence again, like an oyster withdrawing into his shell. "Oh, Dotty," said Susie presently, "tell me what you saw out west. I want to hear all about it." "Well, I saw a pandrammer," replied Dotty briefly. "What in the world is that?" said Johnny. "It's a long picture, and they keep pulling it out like India rubber." "She means panorama," cried Johnny. "Why, I went to one last night. We can see as much as you can without going out west either." Here was another sensation. Dotty might as well have been eating ashes as the delicious dinner before her. "Don't you like your pudding, dear?" asked Aunt Eastman. "Oh, yes'm, I always like coker whacker," replied the unfortunate Dotty, stumbling over the word tapioca. In spite of their mother's warning frown, the three young Eastmans laughed, while Susie and Prudy, who had kinder hearts and better manners, drew down their mouths with the greatest solemnity. "I ain't going to speak another word," cried the persecuted little traveler, setting down her goblet and hitting it against her plate till it rang again. "Error!" cried out Florence from the other side of the table. "There's no such word as ain't." This was too much. Dotty had smarted under these cruel blows long enough. She hastily arose from the table and rushed out of the room. "Florence and Percy, you are both very thoughtless," said Mrs. Eastman reprovingly. Mrs. Parlin looked deeply pained, as she always did when her little daughter gave way to her temper, but she made no allusion to the subject, and tried to go on with her dinner as if nothing had happened. Dotty ran into the front yard, threw herself on the ground, and buried her face in a verbena bed. There, it wasn't of any use. She couldn't be good. It wouldn't last. When she had just come home and had so many things to tell, and supposed everybody would be glad to see her and hear her talk, why, Percy and Florence must just spoil it all by laughing. Oh, it was too bad. "I wish I hadn't come. I wish I'd been switched off," sighed Dotty, meaning, if she meant anything, that she wished the cars had whirled her away to the ends of the earth instead of bringing her home, where people were all ready, with one accord, to trample her into the dust. "Here I've been way off, and I know how to travel and keep my ticket in my glove. 6 years old, going on 7. Been down in a coal mine. Prudy never dared to. Had a jigger cut out of my side. Been to the 'sylum. One of the conductors said, 'That's a fine little daughter of yours, sir.' I heard Aunt Ria washed all the grease spots out of my dress, and I had on a clean ruffle. And then, just 'cause I couldn't say coker whacker." "There, there, don't feel so bad, you precious sister," said a soothing voice, and a soft cheek was pressed to Dotty's, and a pair of loving arms clasped her close. Percy was real too bad, and so was Flossie, so there. "Oh, Prudy, I wish they were every one of 'em in the penitential, locked in, and Johnny too. Me just got home and never did a single thing to them, and there they laughed right in my face." "But you know, dear, they don't think," said Prudy, who found it unsafe to sympathize too much with her angry sister. "They never do think. They don't mean any harm." "I'll make 'em think," cried Dotty fiercely. "I'll scare 'em so they'll think. I'll take a pumpkin, and I'll take a watermelon, and I'll take—" "Dear me, Dotty, that is a beautiful ring on your finger. I wish I had one just like it." Dotty cast a suspicious glance at her sister. "Don't you try to pacify me, Prudy Parlin." Prudy held a handful of southernwood to her nose and smiled behind it. This isn't temper, Prudy Parlin, 'cause you said your own self they abused me. Such a cunning little pearl, remarked Prudy, still admiring the ring. How glad I should be if you'd wished it were on my finger, Dotty. They abused me, Prudy Parlin, and you know it. Only till night, Dotty Dimple. Just wish it on till night. Well, there, exclaimed Dotty at last. Hold out your finger if you can't stop teasing. But I haven't any temper, and you needn't act just if you's trying to pacify me. Oh, thank you, Dotty. On my third finger. Now I've wished it on, Pretty, and it's a good enough wish for you when you won't pity me. But now I'm going up in the bathing room to stay, and you can't make me come down, not a single step. I shan't want you to come down, Dotty. There's the very place I'm going to myself. We'll carry up the needle gun. It's the nicest thing to play with. Come, let's hurry upstairs the back way, little sister, for they'll be out from dinner and see us. Dotty needed no second hint. In half an hour she was so far recovered from the megrims, hopefully I ever pronounced that word right, as to be hungry, when Prudy secretly begged for some pudding for her of the willing Angeline. Then the same little peacemaker went to her cousins and made them each and all promise to be more careful of her sister's feelings, after which there was a nut cracking in the woodshed, and a loud call for Miss Dimple, who consented to go down after much urging, and was the merriest one of the whole party. And that's the end of chapter 4. Hey guys, subscribe to our channel, or go see theminimizedlife.com, or you can of course check out some more videos. We've got some great books, but you're going to want to go to the website if you want some descriptions. We've got all kinds of information there. We'll see you later.